welcome back to another episode of Scuttlebutt, the official podcast of the National Museum of the Surface Navy. We are coming to you from the Associated Foundation's Training Center aboard Battleship, Iowa, and we have a shortened crew in the center today. We've got Mike Getcher, Kyle Aubie, and me, Marianne Fengler, and we are joined from San Diego by Commander Jenna Van Zeyl. Did I get that right?
Yes, Van Zeyl. Good job.
Awesome. And we're going to talk to her a little bit today about how she ended up where she did in the Navy. You want to introduce yourself, Jenna?
Yes. Thank you for all having me here today for this interview. As far as who I am, my name is Jenna Van Zeyl. I'm the commanding officer of USS SAVANNAH, the Gold Crew captain. We do have a rotating crew for littoral combat ship. And I grew up in the Midwest, in the Chicagoland area. The city and high school I graduated from was New Lenox, Illinois, and it was Lincoln Way High School. I was class of 1998. And then from there, I went to a preparatory school and eventually the Naval Academy, graduating in 2003. And I have service selected as a surface warfare officer, having served on ships now, and I am approaching my 20th year of commissioned service here in May. I'm very excited.
Congrats.
Wow, congrats. That's awesome.
That's amazing. My son is a Naval Academy grad, so I've been through that. It's an incredible experience. This is as a parent.
Yes.
And for you, I'm sure it was amazing, equally as amazing. I'm kind of curious, how did you get there? How were you inspired to actually get to the Naval Academy and go drive ships?
Yeah, as far as specifically the Naval Academy, it was later on in my high school experience that I kind of explored more of the Naval Academy. Originally, I always knew that I wanted to, my ultimate goal as a child was to be an astronaut. I kind of grew up in, the space shuttle era, and I still am incredibly fascinated by it. I've never quite given up on that dream of potentially applying for that program or working somehow in the space industry, maybe after my naval career. And I looked for schools and organizations that really had a great program. And I thought I originally wanted to join the Air Force. I knew I wanted to be in the military. I love the thought of serving our country and protecting our freedom and rights that we have in this wonderful country that we live in. And I was originally drawn to the Air Force Academy, thinking that was where I was going to go. But after kind of doing a little bit more exploration and research, I found that the Naval Academy has a really, really good program. And I love the history involved in the Navy. I visited the Naval Academy and I said, hey, this place looks great. And it took an extra year of applying, but I eventually got in. And I'm really honored. Studied, I wanted to study aerospace engineering, astroengineering, and so that's what I ended up doing throughout my time there. It was no easy path.
Oh my gosh.
I definitely didn't get a whole lot of liberty at the Naval Academy. Studying most of the time, but I'm glad that I did it, and have been serving out on ships since then.
How did you end up as a SWO? I mean, surface Navy, did it just, it's fascinating because I would think, go ahead.
Yeah, it was one of those things that I thought I wanted to be a pilot. In time, I ended up changing my course, towards the latter part of my career there at my time at the Naval Academy, and I ended up serving on the ships. And originally I thought I was just going to go and be a surface warfare officer, earn my PIN, and try to laterally transfer maybe into a different community, more space related. But the more I served on the ships, the more I realized I really loved the leadership opportunities. I loved what the history and the organization that being a surface warfare officer brings. And in time, I ended up serving on a variety of ballistic missile defense ships that are very much integrated into the atmosphere type of warfare area that is a big part of what we do to defend our country. So I really, really enjoyed that.
That's amazing. Did you do any postgraduate work or anything along those lines? Typically, the Navy does stuff like that.
I did get 2 graduate degrees. They were not in engineering.
Only
One
two?
was through the War College.
Man.
Slacker?
Yeah, big slacker. No, I did went through the War College, which is kind of like the National Security and Strategic Study program through the War College. And then when I was working on my graduate degree, I lived in Hawaii at the time, and they really didn't have a program kind of related to what I was looking for. And so I kind of shifted gears and did an American Studies graduate program, which I absolutely loved. Learned a whole lot about our history and our service and what we do as an organization as far as like the history of our country, which I thought was a really big part of what it means to be a leader, to kind of understand our sailors and understand the backgrounds of where they came from and the history of our country. Was very fascinated by it. I'm glad I did it, but the reasonings behind it really were the opportunities in Hawaii just weren't there for a astroengineering graduate program. And at the time that I was working on my graduate degree, the online graduate programs really weren't advanced at the time. They've come a long way now, but at the time they weren't there.
You know, it's amazing. I want to talk about leadership in a minute or just ask questions, but I want to comment that the opportunities in the Navy are phenomenal. You know, my son has a master's degree too, and I wouldn't be surprised, you know, if they throw a doctorate opportunity at him. You know, a lot of the kids that we know just have a tremendous opportunity. And the same thing with enlisted too. The amount of schooling they have now is phenomenal from what I can see. I think it's really cool.
They have fellowships. You know, I have friends that have gone and earned multiple graduate degrees. And, you know, I have a brother-in-law who was able to go to Harvard. And I just think it was just phenomenal. And I bring that up because my brother-in-law is also a surface warfare officer. Okay. So we're classmates. Ironically, my sister married one of my classmates. So
that actually isn't surprising watching my son.
Yeah. So yeah, I look at those opportunities and I think they're really great.
So was your introduction to leadership mostly at the academy, or did you have something before that? I know my son picked up a little bit of understanding of what leadership even was in Boy Scouts. I don't know if you had a similar experience or if it was just a walk into the academy and off you go.
Yeah, there was some similar experiences to that kind of growing up. I am the oldest of 3 children, so I think leadership even in that essence was from the beginning. And then I was just a part of a variety of different extracurricular activities. One that I also, I think, learned a lot from, I had joined the Civil Air Patrol. Again, thinking I was going to like lean more towards the Air Force when I was originally interested in the military. That was kind of the Air Force's component, is the Civil Air Patrol instead of the Sea Cadets, which is more of the Navy high school program. And then I did junior ROTC at high school, which was some opportunities. I was in the high school that I went to in Illinois had a really huge band organization. So depending on who's listening right now, their backgrounds, they might be like, band's not a leadership organization, but I came from a school that had a very, very competitive, large marching band. And it was a lot of fun, but there were definitely some leadership opportunities in there as well.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I don't want to be the only one asking questions here, but
you're asking good questions. No.
Well, what do you like most about being CO? I mean, I think I have opinions on my end for what I'm doing, but talk to me.
No, yeah, I think being the commanding officer, you have this opportunity to really kind of shape the narrative and the dynamic of where you're trying to take a crew, and then hopefully empower those that are working in that organization to kind of carry it out. And you know, there's a lot of responsibility and authority that come with it, but there's also a lot of like there's so many times that I look at it and I go, gosh, I am just so proud of like what this crew is accomplishing, and being able to sit back and say, it's not me, but seeing that how like kind of setting that tone in that context and all of those parameters have helped build and shape their capability to achieve these huge wins. That's what I think I'm enjoying the most right now. Without to go into too many details, you know, about what the crew is doing. I was a pre-commissioning CO for a crew that, you know, had originally started to be formed just before COVID, but then had to, you know, things got put on pause due to COVID. And so kind of picking a crew up who had gotten, you know, kind of put on the shelf for a little bit due to the dynamics of the pandemic, and then bringing it to life and now seeing what they're achieving, it's really an honor to be their CO right now. I'm really proud of them.
That's cool.
Yeah.
How many people do you have working for you right now?
This crew, based on the construct of Littoral Combat Ship, it's a minimally manned crew, so it's 63 people. But to think, it's small town USA on a United States, Navy warship where still all of the things that are required of any sailor any day are still required by this crew. And so, on other platforms like the Battleship Iowa at the time, I mean, people were integrated and acting as team members, but people had their job, and it was their job only to focus on, where it's the complete opposite now on the ship that I'm on, where everyone does everything. You're the firefighter, you're the cop, you're the cook, you're you're cleaning, you're doing your daily rate. And so to see them accomplish all of the requirements that the Navy's expecting of them with such a small crew size and still keeping a positive attitude and moving forward, representing the country and being the best sailors that they can be, it's just such a great experience to be going through right now.
I love that. Women haven't been on combat ships all that long. How has it been for you, and how do you feel about the idea of actually going into combat?
We did a presentation today at the command on Women's History Month, and I brought this up to some of the crew members, not to go into all of my personal story with them and bore them, but I was saying, hey, for some of you, think about how far along our country has come as far as women in service. I mean, women have always been in the backgrounds of war and warfare all the way back. You can keep going back far enough even to the revolutionary times. But as far as serving on ships at sea in war zones, that has been something that only recently in the last 30 years has really transitioned. And even at the time where I was service selecting to be a surface warfare officer, there was a variety of designators and jobs that I couldn't commission into just based on being a woman. At the time, submarines and so forth were not an option for women to serve. And so I only had a handful of service selection options. I'm still incredibly happy with my selection to be a surface warfare officer because I think it's the best job in the Navy. However, being a woman at sea during those times, there were times that I served on all-male ships where the enlisted crew was all men. I actually never had any issues with it. I never, found that to be something that set me back. But I am proud to say now that all the ships that I'm serving on are very integrated, from gender, diversity, just really anything you could possibly think about. There's every form of diversity in the commands that I've been serving on now. And so being in war particularly, that's not something that really shakes me or I have any issue with, because I think it goes back to kind of setting that tone as far as being able to have that warfighter mentality. And in fact, I think having kind of a different context as far as you think of war and you think of warfare, and I think people probably have a different picture in mind than if they saw my picture. But being out at sea, you have to be this really dynamic, composed warfighter in order to make sure that we're winning our nation's wars. So.
Yeah, and I think, we're talking about leadership. Obviously, what I've done is on a much smaller scale than you, but having been in sort of second in command roles, I don't think I've ever had any problems either. And it's mostly if you come off like you know what you're doing and you sort of let people perform to their abilities and potentially help them grow too, I feel like you do very well. Have you had a similar experience in the Navy?
I have. I would say there are times that I have had to work on my delivery of certain items.
Yeah.
And making sure that if I am giving direction and trying to be very direct and firm, that I don't come off as harsh.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's nothing against even me as the transmitter or the person that's receiving the message. It's just the dynamic of how information is shared. Some individuals don't receive it so well, and so it's not that I have to necessarily completely ask please and thank you and could you if you have time. I can still be extremely direct in what is being expected or what needs to be done, but trying to do it in a delivery method that works for every individual. And every individual is different, is what I've learned over time. Trying to find a way to be very personal with people because, one, I want to be, but secondly, I think that also even just helps, in our organization. We're in a people organization and in a people business. And at the end of any war that we're going to win, it's the people that are going to bring us there. And understanding that from the get-go is the most important piece to this.
That's huge, actually, for me. I grew up doing mechanical things. I was a diesel mechanic, then a mechanical engineer, and then a merchant marine engineer, and you end up getting tasks done, just getting the job done. But ultimately, you end up learning that it really is all about people. I get that. And one of the things I figured out finally was how much inspiration I'm providing. And I didn't even know it. I was clueless on that. I mean, genuinely clueless. And even here, just bringing the ship out of mothballs, Jonathan and I talk about it, my boss, or our collective bosses here, actually, and we didn't really get that. We truly didn't understand it. And suddenly people were looking at us in a different way. And it was like, oh. Really, it was kind of amazing for us. It was a good transition too.
Yeah. Yeah, there's
and it's important too to be able to push individuals even beyond what their comfort zone is, and taking them to a place that they didn't even think that they could go. And sometimes doing that, I know, isn't popular amongst individuals. And sometimes as a woman in the organization, it might seem that. I don't know how else to say it, but sometimes a gentleman, sitting there pushing them is kind of more of what they're looking for, and seeing a woman push them past their limits is not as nurturing as that they would like. And but at the end of the day, I think they see what their capability is, and that they're thankful for the opportunity to have grown and be shaped. But during the time, they may not enjoy it so much.
Yeah. You want to say something?
Well, I was going back to the people comment and everything. I think that's sort of, we started our whole call off by talking about we like having people on to learn about them and learn about their stories. And I think that's a really big part. And David, who served on Iowa back in the 80s, he talked about that all the time. That it makes it so special that it's just the people and the crew that you have with you that kind of creates the whole, I guess, success story of your ship or your service or your time in any kind of organization. And I do hate to do this. I have to run out and put in the good word for the National Museum of the Surface Navy. We have a team out in Iowa right now that we're phoning into DC, where there's another ask out there for a big dollar sum for that project. So it was great to meet you. Thank you so much for coming on. I look forward to listening to the rest of this podcast, and I'll leave you all to it.
Thanks, Kyle.
Bye, Kyle.
You bet,
Just
go get
abandon
them.
us.
I didn't mean to.
Exit stage right sort of thing.
Actually,
I want to follow up on that. I want to say, there's such tremendous satisfaction when that all comes together, and it's almost cheating with a ship, because it's in some ways so easy to make that happen on board, because it's a confined atmosphere. You can't get out of there. You have to either make it work or it doesn't work. And I don't know. In terms of talking about people, I love watching people grow that way.
And we talk about that too. People who have served on a vessel, whether it's commercial or military, have a much different point of view of a lot of things like that. It's really interesting to watch.
Yeah, and I think it the worlds that we live in, where when you're in those types of organizations and you really can't get away from the person that's bothering you, figuring out a way to get along. What are your common interests? What can you agree on, and what you can put past you and move ahead for the better good of the ship, and always trying to keep that concept. Something that I learned at the Naval Academy from the get-go is shipmate self.
Yes.
And it's taken me very, very far throughout this career. I will let you know, nowadays, it's not the most popular term amongst, if you talk about that, some folks might not relate. some sailors may not relate, even with all of the training that they receive, because we kind of do live in a world right now where that's not necessarily the mantra. And I do appreciate, like, the ship's motto for Savannah is not for self, but for others. And so instead of saying ship, shipmate, self, often I will kind of reference back to our ship's motto of not for self, but for others, because it's the exact same mindset. And so what I've found is, like, hey, if you can put your differences beside you, try to find your common interests and work for the betterment of the ship, or for others, I think it'll take people really far, because otherwise everyone else will just want to be at each other's throats the whole time for a whole 6-month deployment. And believe me, it's like everywhere you go, the one person that you don't get along with is the person that you're going to be on watch with. You're going to be, bunked with. It's just the circumstances are that you're going to be together all the time. So you might as well just try your best to get along. And if there's a difference, put it out in the open and see if you guys can resolve it. And so I have tried to stay as unemotional as possible with this line of service, and give people the facts, talk about facts, but also take some time to get to know each other, because you might actually have a lot of things in common that you might have not realized.
Exactly. Yeah. Do you find that, so for Iowa back in the day, her crew was anywhere from 1,800 to 2,800, depending on which era she was in. So when you hear 63, it seems much smaller. Do you find you can really create kind of a family atmosphere with that? And, do you know everyone, or there's still people that you don't recognize?
I recognize everybody.
Awesome.
I do know everybody's name. I have a general awareness of kind of what's going on with individuals. Every once in a while, someone tends to be a little more quiet or reserved, and being the captain, they're a little more timid with all of their personal information. But I do generally try to get to know everybody and get to. I mean, of course, with the chief, petty officers, and our officers in the wardroom, I know every one of them, and I know a lot more about them than, let's say, some of the other crew members. But I'm really trying to make an effort to get to know every single person. And whether or not the crew realizes that I really do think about each one of them quite often, making sure that if someone is struggling in an area, that we can find a way forward and a way ahead. On whatever it might be.
Yeah, it really is about caring for people, and that's the bottom line. All there is to it. We get that here. We have a different crew. Our crew is 90% volunteer. There's 53 paid staff here. And,
are we that many now?
Yeah, probably 30 of them are part time. They work a day or two a week, but 20 or 25 full time people that run this operation. Nowhere near as many as used to be here. Nowhere near. It's almost comical. 63 people is probably just first division aboard the ship, probably. Yeah. And there was 4 deck divisions, so a different animal. But we actually have a lot more in common with you and your crew because we're so small. Almost the same crew size if you think of it from a paid perspective. So
small but mighty.
And you're trying to make it work, and I'm sure there's personalities involved that's complicated.
There's drama. We have a lot of that. It's all good, but it's a real challenge. But focusing on people is everything. That was a big transition for me in leadership. It's one thing to lead a project and go build something. It's much different. By the way, I'm going to say this probably to my detriment, but I sailed on ships that were either all male, or ships that had a mixed crew. And I can tell you that the all-male crew was a nightmare. I can say that very clearly, and I can probably even tell you names, but I won't. I don't know what it was about that, but being 6 months away with the same bunch of guys was just not happy for me. When we had a mixture of people on the ship or the boats that I was on, it was just always much better. It was kind of comical.
We definitely are a better organization from having some integration there.
Yeah, it's absolutely, I agree.
Yeah. Without going into any details, I definitely agree too, because I always joke around how it's a much more organized Navy now that a lot of women have shown up.
To me, it was just about tempering the attitudes and the emotions. it was comical to me to look back and figure that a bunch of old men can be just as bad as anybody. It was pretty funny. But still, it was fun. I didn't see a lot of female merchant marine folks. I didn't go to an academy. My son did, but I didn't get to. I didn't even really go up through the ranks necessarily either. But I didn't see that many women, but there were some. And it was always fun to...
I still, from time to time, see, our oiler fleet is our merchant marine organization from the USNS side of things.
Right.
And, majority of that time it is all male mariners that were over there. Only occasionally there were women. And I could never tell you exactly why. I do know, being at sea and wanting to have a family has its challenges, just from a physiological standpoint. Yeah. And so that definitely could be a big part in it. And so I know the Navy's made some strides to make sure that we've progressed as far as being able to help support women who do want to have children. Not that you have to, but just that if you want to, that could be an option for you without having to sacrifice between one or the other. So I think that's a big part of it.
That's really amazing. Every female sailor that I know most of the boats that I've worked on are nonprofits, and every female sailor I've known that wanted to have kids ended up having to go ashore, at least for quite a while. I think one of them is still driving a boat, but she was working in the Great Lakes for a while, so she wasn't really going too far from home. So that's really cool that they're making that work for you.
Cool. How much longer is your duty there on the Savannah? How much time do you have?
I probably have just about a year to go before I would be transferring again. So I'm looking probably in April timeframe of 2024.
Okay. Well, what are you thinking? What's next?
Yeah.
Good question. I definitely would like to stay here in California. I'm really enjoying it here. I should more than likely be rotating to a shore job. And what I do as far as the job is still undetermined. But I'm hoping I'm going to be staying in. I know I said I'm approaching retirement, but that's a big lie. I'm not retiring right now. I'm going to be staying in. I'm going to be staying in. So I'm hoping to kind of meet the next big milestone marks in this career, which will eventually allow me to return back to sea in another command position. But that's all yet to be determined. And fingers crossed that I should be being looked at here in the next year or two for my next promotion for pay grade. So
cool.
I would like to. That would be really nice to be able to be selected for 06 for captain. That's what I'm hoping.
Well, we're rooting for you.
Yeah.
And by the way, just in case we didn't mention it, we are a volunteer organization if you end up on shore. Just saying.
San Diego's not very far away.
No, it's not. And we have overnight bunks, just saying.
You bet.
That's all good stuff. You asked earlier when we first met about our organization. Of course, we are becoming the National Museum of the Surface Navy, and how the briefest version of how that occurred was the Navy didn't have a museum for the surface fleet. They just didn't. There's several for the submarines. The Seabees have their own. Of course, the Air guys have one down in Pensacola. I think the Spec War guys have some as well. And I think there's a general one, of course, back in the Washington Navy Yard. But the largest component of the Navy, the surface Navy, had no museum dedicated to them. And literally we stumbled into that at the Washington Navy Yard. It was they were going to try to build it somewhere else, and it just didn't work out. And so we said, we want to do something bigger, and we want to be something, just more extraordinary, I think, for the nation. And next thing you know, we've got not just the deal with the Navy History and Heritage Command, but also congressional designation as such. So we plan on opening at least a portion of the National Museum of the Surface Navy in 2025. I think it's the 250th anniversary, if I got my numbers right.
Yeah.
So it'd be October
of that year.
13th. Yeah. So really exciting. It's fun to see a surface warfare officer come to the podcast too and chat, because it's really what we're all about. We want more stories. This is all about the people. The ships are cool. I love them. But in fact, I love this one somehow, 11 years on it. But still, it's about the people. And so we're really pleased to have you here.
Yeah, and the Navy, this is what we've been doing from the beginning. is surface warfare. So to think that that was kind of an unspoken narrative in the museums, I mean, shamefully, I didn't know we didn't have a museum. I'm kind of shocked. I'm like,
I
what
know
do you mean?
the initial. We've all read the books, and in fact, she and I are both history geeks. But the Six Frigates book is great and talks about that first 6 vessels that we had, and it was all about fighting piracy and the economics of the country, and that's really what we're focused on too. I mean, we're in the middle of Los Angeles Harbor, where there's millions of containers that come back and forth to all these different countries, and really you guys are out there protecting those lines. So that's what we're about too. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think we're running out of time. Are we at 20?
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you one last question, since we're sort of ending Women's History Month on this. What advice do you have for young women about the Navy?
Yeah. As far as advice goes, I would say that the opportunities have really opened up for women to serve in a whole variety of different capacities in the Navy. And as far as advice, I think it's important to understand that you can be a really successful Navy sailor, naval officer, and still stay true to your roots as a woman, and be able to be a mom and a leader in this organization, and that you really can have both. I think often folks tend to get questions about, well, if you have a child, what are you going to do? And you really can do both. It's not easy. Being a working mom in any organization, I think, has its challenges. Certainly being in the Navy and being away is not always the easiest thing to do, as far as having to be away from your family, but I think it's a really, really noble cause, and our country needs really good individuals that are willing to do this nation's work and to serve our country. And so as a woman, you really can do it, and the opportunities to be a successful sailor and have a family and continue to serve your nation is there. And I just don't want to glamorize that it's not going to be a bumper sticker or a poster where you can do it alone. You're going to need help. You're probably going to need a lot of help, whether it means your family moving in with you to help you while you're away, or you might have a spouse or a counterpart that's willing to help you raise your children while you're away. But it definitely is possible. And it also is something that's really worth doing. So for anyone that is considering it or thinking about it but has reservations, I would encourage them to not be afraid of taking that next step and not being afraid to push yourself, and know that you really can be a really great Navy sailor, naval officer, military service member, and be a mother at the same time, if that's something that you want to do. And if you don't want to do it, there's many opportunities to continue to serve as well. But I think that tends to be a big talking point as far as family planning, family dynamics, and being a military service member. It's just you can't do it alone. And it's okay to not do it alone. Sometimes as a woman, we feel like we have to do it all. We feel like we're a failure if we don't do it ourselves, or we're incapable of doing it ourselves, and being able to accept that kind of help and live with that, and know that you still are doing a great job, but knowing that you just can't do it all yourself, and being acceptance of that.
That's awesome.
It really
I love
is.
that. You're going to inspire a lot of people with that.
Yeah, it's all about inspiration.
So Jenna, thank you
It's
so
about
much.
help. Get some help, and don't be afraid to ask for help.
No.
For years, I'll give you one little example of this. For years, I just was too stubborn to hire help to help me with just whatever it might be, whether it's these like kits that you can buy to help make meals at your house, or someone to help you with your yard work, or someone to help you clean your house, or extra helping hand to help pick up your kids after school so you don't feel the pressure. But I finally adapted and accepted that it was okay, and I couldn't do it all, and it was okay not to do it all. And still, it's totally fine.
Jenna, Delegation is good too.
Yeah, it is.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Really
Yeah.
appreciate it. Hope we get to see you at Fleet Week. That would be amazing.
Yeah, come
And-
up. It's a blast.
Yeah.
You know, it really is. It's a
I'm
cool place
after
to be.
it. I want to get Savannah up there for sure.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, you'd be
We'll
welcome.
start pushing. We'll make it happen here. And we'd love to have you back again. So let's stay in touch. And in the meantime, thank you so much for being here. And we're going to wrap up another episode of Scuttlebutt. As usual, if you have any questions, comments, ideas for a podcast topic, feedback for us, hit us up at podcast@labattleship.com. That's podcast at, since David isn't here, I'll do it, labattleship.com. And
Very French.
thanks for being here. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Commander.
You bet.